Hi, welcome to A Mirror Darkly Unbridled Inquiry. While we get things switched around because we haven't figured out all of our triggers and stuff yet, just want to introduce ourselves. This is Robin and I'm Ruth, and this week's topic is Sodom and Gomorrah. We had a really good discussion last week on homosexuality and the difference in what we see in the Bible versus what we see today, and the importance of loving people and to bring them to the Lord. So anyway, it was a pretty good discussion. I had a 12-hour discussion with my brother the next day after he watched the full thing. We didn't agree, but that's fine. Don't have to agree on everything. But anyway, the important thing is to love God and to love people, and that was my whole point. That was our whole point yesterday. Saturday. Did I say yesterday?
Yes.
Okay. So we weren't supposed to be here because I was supposed to spend the day with my sister, and I was supposed to get different hair magically and miraculously, but the hair thing wasn't going to happen, and so I didn't spend the day with my sister. So here we are. So we decided to go ahead and do the show today since I was going to be in town. So Anyway, so, and we're doing things a little bit differently. We're doing segments. So if you have a question or a comment, that was what I meant to say, a question or a comment, put it in the comment section of wherever you're watching it from, either YouTube or Facebook. And then at the end of the segment, then we'll talk about those comments and questions. And it seemed to work better that way. And so we're going to, rather than trying to backtrack what we were talking about and things like that. So just know that when you post a question, we'll get to it. I'm going to set my watch because we are still kind of low tech here. I'm going to set my watch for 10 minutes. And at the end of the 10 minutes, I'll find a good place to break, and then we'll bring up comments and questions. And if we don't have any, I will say that, and then we'll move on. So anyway, so that's how things are going to run. And I'm trying to figure out my Fitbit here. There we go.
Right.
Okay, go ahead and start your intro, hon, and we'll...
Okay, well, this week we decided to do it on Sodom and Gomorrah, which to some extent is a continuation then from last week. The primary passage for Sodom and Gomorrah, of course, is Genesis chapter 19. I also want to bring in Judges chapter 19, which may be unexpected, but of course a lot of people probably have not heard of the story that is in Judges chapter 19, principally because it's the kind of story that you would never hear in Sunday school, particularly not for children, and not likely to have heard any sermons on it. So unless you're reading through the Bible on a regular basis, if you've read through the Bible in a year and you actually did that, then you have probably run across the story and you went, ew. And so anyway, we'll talk about that too. But what I want you to notice from the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is that although some people we have in the English language the word sodomy, which comes from Sodom, based on what is described in this story, but I want you to pay attention to what actually is going on in the story versus what sometimes people think is this. That is, let's look at Genesis chapter 19, and we'll go right to the relevant section of it. Verse 4. Now remember, the angels have come to Sodom and Gomorrah to get Lot and his family out. The two angels we had previously seen when there were three people eating and dining with Abraham in Genesis chapter 18. And God stays there, talks to Abraham and God make a deal as to how many people have to be righteous in Sodom and Gomorrah before God will relent from the idea of destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. The angels, though, go on to Sodom and Gomorrah to get Lot. So, they have arrived, and at verse 4 it says, before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, where are the men who have come to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them. Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him and said, no, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. Get out of our way, they replied. This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them. They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside, that is the 2 angels, reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. And then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so they could not find the door. This is not normal homosexual behavior that's being described, despite what some people may like to say it is. This is a mob that wants to rape somebody. This is forced, coerced sex. You have Lot offering his daughters, which is not any improvement on things. He's saying, no, don't rape these 2 men. Here are my daughters, you can rape them. Which says something about Lot's general moral compass at this point.
Although the Bible does say that
that's the
evil
interest.
in the town did distress him.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, and this kind of goes along with other discussions that we've had, and I wanted to bring that in too. If you go to 2 Peter chapter 2, starting at verse 6, you have this little thing about Lot. It says, see, if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes, this is God, and made them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued Lot, a righteous man, who is distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless, for that righteous man living among them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. And of course, the question then that you may have is, how in the world is Lot a righteous man, given what we just had described to us, where he says, no, don't rape these guys. Here are my daughters. Rape them. This is an improvement.
I'd be like, knock yourselves out. Stay away from my daughters.
Yeah. It's just not...
There must have been a cultural undertone there.
Well, perhaps, but we'll get to that because we're going to go to another passage later. But Lot's behavior is not good.
Right.
And you cannot, by any stretch of the imagination, say it's good, although I have heard many people try to justify Lot's behavior in this incident because it says he's a righteous man, so somehow we've got to make him out to do something good here. No.
You could pull a muscle trying to do that.
Yeah, it's not going to work. The whole point of this is that how is it that Lot is a righteous man? Well, as Christians, what do we say? We were saved by grace alone, by faith alone, by Christ alone. Our righteousness is not in ourselves, our righteousness is in God. What does Ephesians 2, 8, 9, and 10 say? For by grace are you saved through faith, that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, lest anyone should boast, and so on. It is not because Lot does good things that he's a righteous person. It's not because we do good things that we are righteous people. We are righteous, Lot is righteous, because of what Jesus did on the cross. That's it. End of story. We have nothing to contribute to our salvation. Paul says, if you look at Galatians chapter 2, that towards the end, last few verses, that if we could have been saved by the law, then Christ died for nothing. If there is some other way that we could gain entrance into heaven, if we could be made righteous in some other way by our own efforts, then Jesus would not have had to die. That Jesus died means that's the payment. There is nothing else we can do. Stop trying to pay back God.
And the fact that Jesus said before, like in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he was sweating and crying over, well, maybe not crying, but anyway, mourning over what was going to be happening, he said, if there's another way to do this, I'm totally on board with that. And there wasn't, and that's why he had to die. So the two scriptures work really well together to show us that there's nothing we can do to gain our salvation. Mm-hmm. So, and which conversely, there's nothing you can do to lose it or to prevent you from gaining it. And one of the arguments is, well, people need to be convicted of their sin. They need to know what their sin is. Yeah, people know that they're sinners. And whether a specific thing that they're doing, whether they identify it as sin or not, they know their lives are dysfunctional and broken. And that's what Jesus came to fix, was the dysfunction and the broken part. To give you the Holy Spirit to help guide you through this really horrific planet we live on until we step off into eternity.
Right. And so the issue at hand with Sodom and Gomorrah, at least one of the issues, is that you have a mob, that is, all the men, young and old in the city, are perfectly content with the idea of raping people. This is the issue. It has nothing to do with who it is they're raping. It's the fact that they seem to think that this is okay. Now, you have another incident which is almost identical to this one, except for the outcome, to some extent. There are a lot of parallels between these two stories. In the Sodom and Gomorrah story, Lot's daughters are rescued from it. The angels, of course, take care of themselves, and so nothing bad happens to them. The city, of course, ends up being destroyed along with Lot's wife. If we turn to Leviticus chapter 19, you have, and one of the other differences in the story in Leviticus chapter 19 is that nobody is named in this particular story. That is, all the characters in the Leviticus chapter 19 story have no names. One is the Levite, one is his concubine, and the concubine's father. And so you have a Levite whose concubine. Now, what is a concubine? Concubine is a second-class wife. That is, you had different in polygamous societies, you have your primary wives, and then you have secondary wives. Secondary wives, pretty much the only thing they're used for is sex. Anyway, this concubine of his runs away from him and goes back home to her father. And so the Levite decides that he's going to go to the father and get his concubine back. You'll learn in reading the story why she may have run away. Her father, though, is not a particularly nice man either. So she runs away, goes back to him, and so the Levite goes to get the concubine, and the father greets him warmly, welcomes him in, and prevails on him to stay for a while. And it says in verse 4 of chapter 19 of Judges, his father-in-law, the woman's father, prevailed on him to stay, so he remained with him 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. On the 4th day, they got up early, and he prepared to leave. But the woman's father said to his son-in-law, refresh yourself with something to eat, and then you can go. So the two of them sat down to eat and drink together. Afterward, the woman's father said, please stay the night, enjoy yourself. And then the man got up to go. His father-in-law persuaded him, so he stayed there that night. And so you have a 5th day, same process. They eat and drink. Towards the end of the day, father-in-law says, spend the night here, you can go tomorrow. But at this point, verse 10, unwilling to stay another night, the man left and went toward Jebus, that is Jerusalem, with his 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine. When they were near Jebus, that is Jerusalem, and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, come, let's stop at this city of the Jebusites and spend the night. His master replied, no, we won't go into any city where there are people who are not Israelites. We'll go on to Gibeah. He added, come, let's try to reach Gibeah or Ramah and spend the night in one of those places. So he went on, and as the sun set, they neared Gibeah in Benjamin. There they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat in the city square, but no one took them in for the night. That evening, an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the inhabitants of the place were Benjamites, came in from his work in the fields. When he looked and saw the traveler in the city square, the old man asked, where are you going? Where did you come from? And so the old man invites them to spend the night with him. Well, they're eating and drinking in his house, and as time goes on, you have a mob that shows up at the door and says, no, send this man out so we can rape him. Verse 22, while they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house. Pounding on the door, they shouted to the old man who owned the house, bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him. The owner of the house went outside and said to them, no, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this outrageous thing. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I'll bring them out to you, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish, but for this man, don't do such an outrageous thing. But the men outside would not listen to him, so the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night, and at dawn they let her go. And she died. And so the man puts her on his donkey, goes back home, cuts her up into 12 pieces, mails the pieces off to all the other tribes in Israel, and says, look at this horrible thing that's happened. All the other tribes of Israel then go to war against the Benjamites, and they make a vow that they will not allow any of their own daughters to ever marry a Benjamite. They come very close to exterminating the tribe of Benjamin. There's only, what did it say, 3,000 men left. And so then they come up with a plan, because they don't want the Benjamite tribe to die out, that okay, since we can't just give our daughters in marriage, what we'll do is we'll encourage the Benjamites to come and kidnap our daughters and then marry them that way. These are not nice people anywhere, under any circumstances, however you look at the story.
There has to be a cultural underpinning to the whole thing, though. So we did pass the 10-minute mark, but you were in the middle of reading rather lengthy story.
Yes, it is.
So we didn't have any comments or questions either, so I just figured we keep moving, so I reset my timer. But
one would guess that there's some weird thing going on here, but in any case, it's a weird bad thing.
Right. Well, but we know from the book that you were ghostwriting many years ago that when the country of Saudi Arabia was being founded, he wrote the book. He ghostwrote a book about the Saudi family and the founding of
Abdulaziz ibn Saud.
There you go.
Founding monarch of Saudi Arabia. Reason Saudi Arabia exists is because of Standard Oil of California. They discovered oil in what today is Saudi Arabia, happened to be on land that was owned by Abdulaziz ibn Saud, and he was able, because of the money and everything, to make connections with other tribes. He conquered other tribes and eventually established himself as the reigning monarch over the whole peninsula.
Right. So, big bunny on a really wide trail there.
Okay.
But my point is that the nomadic people, when the big dust storms would come, the big haboobs, they would bring their camels inside the tent, but they'd leave the women outside. So women's roles that's relatively recent as far when you're talking about biblical times.
Yeah, this we're talking about the 20th century.
Yeah, so early 20th century, this is happening in Saudi Arabia, right?
Saudi Arabia.
So, but anyway. So imagine back in biblical times, women had a very low position. So if you had a guest in your house, especially males, they would take a higher position than your own daughters. And see, we value our children much more than those people did. And so if someone said, oh, you have a really hot looking guest in your house, send him out here so we can rape him. I mean, you might try to protect him, but it's never an option to say, well, here's my beautiful virgin daughter, take her and destroy her life.
Yeah, actually, and this is an important concept which we don't have to quite the same level as the people in the Middle East had, and perhaps still have to a large extent, is the concept of exactly how important it is to protect your guests. It's rather extreme. There are stories told of people fighting battles against surrounding tribes, and one of the enemy combatants happens to tumble into your tent, and you start fighting to protect that guy from your comrades in your village because he's now inside your tent and he's now a guest as a consequence.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's rather odd. And so there is this extreme. If you want to get a sense of that, the doctoral dissertation of, his name just went out of my head. It's Chesed in the Bible is the title of it. I got it in my office. But anyway, the word Chesed, it shows up about 65 or so times in the Old Testament, and it's used to describe the obligations that exist when you are part of a contractual relationship. And so, for instance, David and Jonathan entered into a contract or a covenant, and Chesed described the requirements of that relationship. Chesed describes the requirements between God and Israel. It is God enters into the contract because he loves them, makes the contract, and now Chesed is used to describe the obligations. And so guests, because they're your guest, you're now in a contractual relationship with them, and you are obligated to provide chesed for them. You'll see the word in the Old Testament translated as loving kindness, love, loyalty. It's a difficult word to translate because we don't have that really in English. The closest we have is if you think in terms of a marriage relationship. As you enter into marriage because you have the warm fuzzies for the person, but once you've entered into the marriage, then there are now some contractual legal obligations. And that's what's captured by that term, chesed. So yeah, chesed is in play in both of these two stories, both the Sodom and Gomorrah story as well as the story in Judges chapter 19. It is because these people are guests in this person's house, the host owes protection to them, even to the extent of, here, rape my daughter, which makes no sense and is really not consistent with the biblical message. One of the things to keep in mind about the Bible, we've talked about this before, is that you have both nice people and not nice people. You have good guys and bad guys. You have heroes and villains. And it's really not hard to tell the villainous part of these stories. That is, the fact that you're disgusted and get the willies from these things, that's the point.
So I'm not supposed to chop up a dead concubine into 12 pieces and send her Federal Express?
Probably
to
not.
12 friends?
Not that she'd really care at that point since she's already dead.
Federal Express might mind, and the 12 friends I send her to might.
Yeah, they might be bothered.
Might disrupt.
Yeah, that is, again, the one verse that summarizes the Bible. For instance, Matthew chapter 17, verse 19, or chapter 12, verse. Matthew 12. Shoot, went out of my head. Anyway, do to others you'd have them do to you.
It's
golden
become
rule.
a leaky place.
Yes,
lately.
it is a leaky place. Well, I'm recovering from being sick.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's funny because
love your neighbors yourself is being violated extensively in both of these stories. So these stories are used as don't do this.
Right. Well, I think it would be funny to be like, okay, so if your concubine does die, here's how you dispose of the body. It's not directions for that.
No,
so,
it's not.
Oh, but it's amusing to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said we had a comment?
Well, no, we're not to the end of the segment.
Oh,
we do,
okay, but we're not to the end of the segment
to the
yet.
End. You're right. We're
okay, so
doing it in segments. I'm still training
him. Yeah, you are.
So it's getting hot up here.
Yeah, well, the AC's on, the fans are going. It's not as hot today as it has been recently. Yeah. So, anyway, I don't have a fever, so I'm not contributing to this. So yeah, Sodom and Gomorrah. Why in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah people have gotten the homosexual aspect of it as being the dominant one is a little puzzling to me, because that's not really what's happening. That is, you have, let us rape these people. Mm-hmm. That's a bad thing regardless of the gender. The gender, I would say, is immaterial in the purpose of the story.
And what was going on in Gomorrah? Is it just like Minneapolis, St. Paul? They're just
right. They're just right
together?
There together. It's like Palmdale and Lancaster. It'd be the Antelope Valley.
Right.
Let's toast that. Well, that's what God's doing. It's very hot out.
Slowly roasting us over time. There's no hailstone and all that.
No, it's a slow cook.
Slow burn. Yeah, we're in a crock pot.
We're in a crock pot.
So, we're close to the end of the segment, so let's go ahead and do the comics. We're in a good breaking point. So, it says, so does Jude 7 agree with your assessment of what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah?
Well, what's Jude 7 say?
I don't know. That's your job.
Okay, let's go.
I just sit here and listen and think of questions to ask.
Yes.
And read comments. I'm your Vanna White.
Yeah, they gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. I would say that rape is a sexual perversion. That's not normal, and that's not something that any normal human being should think, oh yeah, this is a good thing to do. So yes, it is perfectly consistent.
Do you think that it applies to homosexuality? I think that is the heart of the question.
Well, the heart of the issue is forcible sexual activity. That is, forcing someone to engage in sex is what is being decried. Because again, the offer is made here. See why in both cases does the mob want to rape this guy or these guys? What is their reason for wanting to do that. Is it something? See, rape is something other than simple, I want to have sex because
Right.
it's fun. There's more to it than that.
It's a violent
domination.
act.
It's a violent act. It's a domination. And so some people look at both of these two incidents, both the one in Judges chapter 19 and the one in Genesis chapter 19, and think that it has something to do with the desire on the part of the mobs to show who it is that's actually the boss, that they're the ones running things, that they're the ones that are in charge.
The comment was you did not read the whole verse from Jude 7.
In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. Okay, what is his point?
Okay, so the question is, what is your point? Because he read the whole, unless you want all of Jude 7 read.
Well, Jude is one chapter. Verse 7 is...
Oh, it's verse 7. Okay, yeah, Jude is a small book.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's another, while he's bringing up his point, here's another comment, since we're still in the comment section, sort of. One reason homosexuality is so widely associated with Sodom is sodomy and sodomite. Yeah, and I think he came in late. Yeah.
But the term Sodom comes from this story in Genesis chapter 19. That is Sodom and Gomorrah, specifically this story where these guys want to have sex with the two visitors that are angels.
Right.
They view them as just men, and they're described as men actually in the story. And so from that, then that's applied to homosexuality. But the type of sexual behavior that we see being described both in Genesis chapter 19 and in Judges chapter 19 is forcible sex. That is rape. And so that's a crime in and of itself. And again, when you think in terms of do to others, you'd have them do to you, this obviously violates that, regardless of the gender of the people involved.
Okay, so he has an explanation. In the New King James verse, he said farce, but I'm sure it's a typo.
Yeah.
It says, and gone after strange flesh.
Okay.
So what is let's look at the Greek or whatever it's written in and see what it means, because I'm not sure about New King James, but the King James version itself was translated long before we had a lot of the more original manuscripts, and so some things the translation maybe isn't as reliable in some places.
Yeah.
But I'm just filling time till he can look. So this is just me singing.
Well, literally
and
it is strange flesh.
Okay.
So, but that's taken as an idiom meaning perversion.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Strange flesh could mean a lot of things. Like strange flesh could mean somebody who's not your spouse.
Well, flesh is used in the New Testament. Paul uses it a lot to indicate the sinful nature. And so, again, that's why the NIV translates as perversion, that is going after strange sin. That is, rape is not normal. It's a perverse behavior.
Right.
And it's not a term that's used for homosexuality. So.
Oh, it's not used for that?
Well, I mean, you can't say that going after strange flesh means being gay.
Okay.
That would not be a reasonable leap, because going after strange sin, if you want to use it, or sin nature, or peculiar sin nature, it's perversion. And so non-standard sex, and so if you want to say that homosexuality is evil, then you could use it that way, but there are a lot of other behaviors that would fall under that general category of bad behavior.
Right.
So perversion is the reason the NIV translates it that way.
Okay.
Because they use the word flesh being used as a stand-in for the idea of sinful nature. So strange sinful nature.
So But he said, I believe it's the same as Romans 1:27.
Yes, I know he does.
Okay, do you want to talk about it?
Well, we've talked about it last week.
Well, we can still talk about it. This is an extension of
I know
last
it's
week.
an extension of last week. I don't understand the fixation, quite frankly.
Okay.
Because it seems a little bit odd to me that, okay, why, again, what was the term I used last week, sin faddism. There are certain sins that for whatever reason, and it cycles, become a big cause, something we have to be particularly unhappy and miserable about, and think, okay, this means that everything is bad. That is, there's a lot of sin, and the issue for us as Christians is not this huge list of sins that we can make, but rather the solution to the problem that we have.
And I think we made that point when we were talking about, it wasn't last week, but I think it was the week before, because I had made the observation through my reading of Scripture that Jesus never says turn or burn. That's never his thing. But basically the conclusion we came to is everyone is going to fall into this pit unless they accept Jesus, who will save them from this pit. So the pit is the understood, and
there's this big hole in the ground that everybody's running towards, and we're back here saying, wait, there's a different direction.
The bridge is out. The bridge is out.
There's a
Slow the
different
train
direction
down.
you can go. You don't have to do this. Come here. We have a solution, a way of solving your problem.
Right.
And I think that is the focus that you see scripturally is more on the solution to the problem. That is, as Christians, our primary task is to serve as witnesses to what Jesus did on the cross and to offer people the way of salvation. You're going the wrong direction. Here is the solution.
My cousin said to smile. I'm thinking. When I think, I get all smushy faced and people think I'm mad. So thanks, Steve. Yes, I'll smile. There was something I was going to say about that. And my contention is people know that they're sinners. And regardless of what the sin is, they lie, they gossip, they are having sex outside of marriage, they're in a homosexual lifestyle, whatever they're doing, you don't have to point out all the things that Jesus will save them from. Just, your life is broken, you're dysfunctional, I have the solution for that. That's why self-help books sell so well. Because
people know they need
need help. They just don't know what the help is. Or they might know but not think it's going to work for them. Now, if somebody comes to you and says, I'm gay and it's bugging me, then talk to them about it. But I think that itemizing people's sins to go, okay, you're doing this, 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 and this, Jesus can save you from all that. I don't think it's an invalid argument. I just think it's more detail than is necessary because people just need Jesus. If they're not a believer, they need Jesus.
I don't see the same focus on many of the other sins that exist in the world.
And Jesus didn't make a big deal out of the woman that committed adultery. And and that's a sin on the same level. If you want to level your sins, that's on the same level as any other sexual sin. And she committed adultery, and being in a lower station than men, most Pharisees would have stoned her like that just on the word of the other men. And Jesus was like, all you guys, she had to be sleeping with somebody, and they all walked away.
Yeah. And of course, that is part of the problem with the situation. That is, the way the law was set up is that both participants were supposed to suffer, not just half of them.
Right.
So there was a certain unfairness, and they said, we caught her in the act. Okay, well, where's the guy?
Yeah, it was one of you all.
Yeah, how did you catch her in the act?
Yeah.
That's the other interesting question.
Yeah.
what were you doing? Picking outside the window, watching? It's
'Cause
there's all sorts of problems.
There
here.
weren't video cameras back in the day.
Yeah.
So, just saying.
Yeah, being peeping Tom is also sexual perversion.
Yes.
So there you go. Again, because it's coerced, it's not consensual. And this seems to me the primary problem in both cases is it's non-consensual, it's rape. And rape is a bad thing. And I see that as being more the issue than anything else. It's a violent act that is being conducted by mobs. Mobs in and of themselves are a problem. Mobs are, let's put it this way, there's no rationality associated with any mob.
Yeah.
It is pitchforks and torches. You've got a problem right there.
Right. Well, I come back to my Beauty and the Beast analogy.
Yeah.
There are some stories, children's stories, that really show really biblical concepts like really clearly. Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters is one that I love. It's an African Cinderella story, and it shows the truth of the as you've done unto the least of these, so you've done unto me. It's really good if you ever get a chance to read it. It's got beautiful pictures in it too. But anyway,
there's a lot of the Cinderella story comes up in a lot of different cultures.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
Yeah, but this one has that other theme, which the other Cinderella stories don't have. But anyway, talking about what was the book? Now I'm thinking of Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters. What was I talking about?
Cinderella.
No, before that, another children's book about what we're talking about.
I'm not sure what the other.
Beauty and the Beast. Okay. So Beauty's held captive by the Beast, and so is her father. The father, she's able to get her father out. She sacrifices herself to get her father out because he's old and he's sick. And he gets back to town and he tells them that the Beast has Belle. And so the mob, with their pitchforks and their torches, are kill the Beast, kill the Beast. The whole time, Belle is trying to transform him through love. And she's not afraid of him, and she's not telling him what he's doing is wrong. She just loves him. And at the end of the story, he's transformed through magic, of course, but because every fairy tale has to have a magical event. And everything changes too. He's not the only one that's transformed. The teapot and the cup and all those things are transformed back to their human form. It's love that does the transforming, not the mob. And that was kind of my point last week, was that's Jesus' goal, is to transform his enemies into his friends. So that's the whole point. So regardless of what your friend or your acquaintance's sin problem is, you loving them will cause that transformation. Sure, you can preach against their sin, but let me tell you, I know people that have taken a really long time to come to know the Lord because they've been hammered away at over what's missing in their lives, what's wrong with their lives. But then they run into someone who just loves them and their lives are transformed. And not to say that that person didn't have an effect on them in some way, but there's another way to do it. It's not just about standing on the street corner saying the end is near, turn or burn. It's about loving people, having relationships. That's what Jesus did. He had relationships with people. He ate with tax collectors and prostitutes, and he got to know them. The Pharisees were even like, maybe he's one of them. Maybe he's a prostitute. Maybe he's a tax collector. He's as sinful as these guys, when we know for a fact that Jesus was without sin. But he sat in the company of sinners in order to transform them. And I think that is the goal of every part of Scripture. That is the theme that throughout Scripture is that love will transform. Yeah, you can pick at people's sin, but I just think there's a better way to do it.
Right.
And then
again, what is it that our goal is as
Right.
Christians? Our goal as Christians is to share Jesus with people. You want to see them transformed. It may be emotionally satisfying to pick at people, but I don't know that that's the most effective way of getting the transformation that we want.
And the story of Sodom and Gomorrah with Lot getting out of there, Abraham, in the meantime, is negotiating with God. Well, what if there's, 60 people? What if there's 50? And God knew full well what the number was. It was like practically 0. and so the towns had to be destroyed, but God rescued those people out of there. He rescued Lot because even though Lot offered his daughters to the mob. If I was God, I would be like, sorry, dude, you can burn with the rest of them. But God, in his grace and his mercy, rescued them.
Yeah, and see, the thing to keep in mind always, and this is a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, is that God is more concerned with grace, mercy, and forgiveness than he is with justice. Because grace, mercy, and forgiveness, by their nature, are unjust. Because by forgiving someone, by offering them grace and mercy, you are not bringing justice to them. They're not being punished for what they have done. By nature, they're unjust. God, in Ezekiel 18 as an example, says that he is not willing that any should die, but rather that they repent and live. God's goal is always the transformation. He takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked. He doesn't enjoy bringing punishment. You see this reflected in the book of Hosea, which, you have Hosea as the prophet. Being a prophet was always a very bad job. It's not a job that anyone in their right mind would want. And God tells him, I want you to marry a prostitute. So he marries this woman knowing right up front what she is and what her nature is, and she continues to behave as a prostitute during the marriage. It doesn't work well. The purpose being that this serves as a picture of God's relationship with the nation of Israel. That is, the words adultery, prostitution are used as shorthand throughout the Old Testament as a description of what it is that Israel is doing to God. Rather than remaining faithful and worshiping God alone, they're worshiping all these other gods at the same time that they're pretending to worship Yahweh. Just like if you're married to somebody and sleeping around on him or her. So, and then you have in around chapter, I'm trying to remember now, it's either 6 or 9, I believe, you have God talking about the need to punish Israel. And it says that he doesn't enjoy it, he'd rather not do it. It talks about his insides churning at the thought of having to do it. You get a sense that God is really unhappy that he's gotten to this point. I've mentioned before that God is not a strict disciplinarian. He is a promiscuous.
Promiscuous.
No, that's
permissive.
Not, permissive. That's the word I want.
Very different.
Very different word.
Yes.
He is a permissive parent. Because he yells at the Israelites for hundreds of years before he finally sends them into exile. The parallel being, it's like you have children upstairs making ruckus and you're trying to get them shut down. You're yelling at them, "Don't make me come up there." Well, eventually you go up there.
But you give them lots and lots of chances.
Yeah, eventually they get time out, they lose their dinner or whatever. That's what happened to the Israelites.
Well,
but it's not his first. He gives a lot of opportunities to try to see some change.
Well, I think it's really key, too, that if God wanted us to be good, he would never have given Adam and Eve the choice.
Right.
But he wanted us to have a choice. We could choose him or not.
Freedom is more important to God
than being good. And so
which
you
again
are
is
free
counter to what a lot of people think.
To do whatever you want. Is your life going to be better?
Not at all.
Not necessarily. If you read the Proverbs, which are not promises nor are they rules, but they are like
Rules of thumb.
per Richard's Almanac, they are rules of thumb, things to live by.
Yeah,
Listen to
generally
your father, listen to the words of your father, my child, so that your life can go well for you. If you choose not to listen to your father, oh well. I taught my girls to get their oil changes in their cars, and they get their oil changes in their cars last a long time.
Because I haven't gotten electric cars yet.
Yes. So we, on the other hand, don't like to do oil changes. We bought an electric car.
Right.
But you're ruining my analogy.
Sorry.
So the oil changes are a good thing to do, but you don't have to.
Yeah, you can just buy a new car after a while.
Yeah, your mechanic isn't going to call you and be like, hey, you haven't gotten your oil change, you heathen, get in here. So, I mean, he might want to because he's not making money.
There are certain natural consequences.
Yes.
Just like if you continue to behave badly.
If someone comes to you and says, my life is in the toilet and I don't know why, sure, point out his sin to him. Say, well, here's why. But just because he takes that transformational step of accepting Christ as his Savior does not mean that's going to change overnight.
Yeah.
Look at people that have issues with drugs. That's really hard to get over. We have a daughter who was smoking a lot, was smoking cigarettes a lot. And part of it was her mental illness, because people with schizophrenia, the voices are quieter when they use nicotine, and it's been scientifically proven. So we tolerated the cigarette smoking, but she decided she wanted to quit. And the last week or so, she's told me, Mom, I had a cigarette the other day because I was so stressed out. And I'm trying to get her to use other ways to manage her stress. But it's not that she's not my daughter anymore because she smoked a cigarette. I personally think she should start recounting her days. But then I thought, well, it was just one cigarette. She can keep her days counting, because it's not like she's gone totally back to cigarettes. But that's a really hard habit to kick, just like any kind of sinful habit. It's a hard thing to get out of. So, I just think that
change is very difficult for people, regardless of whether it's a good change or not.
Yeah.
Another example would be people who are in abusive relationships. It's very hard to get them out of that. They will tend to keep going back to their abuser over and over and over again, because they feel it's what they're used to, they feel like they deserve it, whatever. It is very discouraging dealing with a person that's in an abusive relationship, because you don't see...
But to keep pointing it out to them, well, this wouldn't have happened if you weren't in an abusive...
It's not useful, because it doesn't get them out. It doesn't get them out of the relationship, and it may prevent... They may decide to not be around you anymore, and so you have no opportunity to help them when they try to get out of the relationship.
And we know someone right now who does keep going back to an abusive relationship, but this person keeps making steps towards being more independent and having her own life. And so we support her in that, even though she's in the abusive relationship, still, we support her in making those positive steps, because when she feels strong enough and she's made that transformation to where I can stand on my own 2 feet, she will eventually.
Right.
But it's going to take time. But any relationship, whether it's heterosexual, homosexual, whatever, if one person is being oppressed, that is where the sin comes in my mind.
Yeah. Well, see, this is where the discussion was last week, is you have 5 places in the Bible that are traditionally used to describe homosexual relationships. The word homosexual is used usually in the translations of these things. The question is this talking about what we would see in gay relationships today, or is it more what we see in Leviticus 9 or in Judges 19 and in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where it's an abusive, coerced, forced sort of thing?
Or a variance in power. Like right now, there's this whole thing about California trying to say that pedophilia is a lifestyle and all that. The problem with that is children cannot consent to sexual relationships, so it's automatically an oppressive thing, so it's wrong.
Yeah.
Same thing with bestiality. An animal cannot say, well, depends on what animal you're trying to have sex with, because probably if it was a cow, you'd probably get kicked to death. But the animal can't consent to the relationship, so it's a dominance and it's abusive, and so it is definitely wrong.
As I pointed out last week with Sarah Rudden's book, Paul Among the People, at least in the New Testament passages where Paul is writing about these sorts of things, the words that are used are words that were commonly used for exactly that kind of relationship, where it's someone that is powerful who is forcing their slave or a child to engage in sexual activity with them.
And I would even argue that traditional marriage, where the man is the boss and the woman has to obey, and he decides he wants to have sex and she doesn't want to, and he makes her, that's wrong.
Yeah, well, it's what you see in
and that's more wrong than two guys in a loving relationship.
Yeah, well, the Judges chapter 19 issue, that is, this guy goes chasing after his concubine who has run away from him. He drags her back with her father's permission, and then sends her out to be raped and killed by a mob. There's obviously some serious problems, plus the whole concept of concubinage anyway, secondary wife whose only purpose is to have sex with her. That in itself is problematic. So anyway, I think, but you have a divergence of opinion within Christianity over what's being described in these different passages. There are many people, probably most, at least evangelical Christians, who would argue that the passages are talking about gay relationships like what we see around us today. Other Christians look at it and say, maybe not. That is, what's being described in these passages is something other than that. Just like the passage in Sodom and Gomorrah is obviously not a loving relationship between the angels and the mob.
Okay, so my timer went off again. We're getting close to the end of this show, but it says, so a homosexual relationship is only okay if it's a healthy relationship and not an abusive relationship.
That would be the argument, yes.
Okay. And then actually, no, the Greeks had a different word for it. Had a different word for homosexuality. I don't know what he means.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, and this is something that my first realization that homosexuality existed was in reading Plato's writings, and specifically his one dialogue where they talk about love, and it was love between two guys. And it took me a while in reading it before I realized what was going on. And so, yeah, that's different than what the words that Paul is using.
Okay.
So,
okay, it's no more wrong for an abusive relationship to be happening than for a homosexual relationship to be happening. We as humans have a tendency to put levels on sin. God doesn't. A sin is a sin is a... Yeah, and I agree with that. Sin is sin. Whether you're gossiping or you're raping someone... Those are bad things. They're both bad things.
Although I'd rather you gossip than
rape people, yeah.
Rape
but people. You can basically do murder to somebody with your words. You can really destroy someone with your words. So in some respects, on our plane of things where we like to make things worse or whatever, but to be honest, I would, if a homosexual couple lesbians, couple gay guys, whatever, wanted to come to church, I would be totally on board with that, because it wouldn't be a problem for me, because if their lives, if what they're doing is bothering them, and if they're not believers, or even if they are believers and it's bothering them, we can help them. If it's not bothering them, what is bothering you? You know, do you just want to come here to worship? Is there some other brokenness in your life? It's not always about homosexuality. People can be other things besides just gay.
And see, one of the issues, and this is perhaps the difficulty too, is that we tend to view the whatever sin we do as being the problem. And see, the problem is not
we have comments down here.
what bad thing we happen to do. The problem is that we are fundamentally broken. That is, we are sinners.
Right.
Not what sin am I happening to do, but I am fundamentally a sinner. And so the expression of my nature is really not the primary problem. What's primarily the problem is what I am, which is a sinner. And that is what God sent his Son to solve, was the fundamental flaw that makes us do these bad things, which we can list endlessly.
Sin
and
is
come up
the
with
illness.
new ones.
What you do is the symptom.
Yeah, those are symptoms.
When you go to the hospital and you're coughing and you can't breathe, what do? They say, oh, you have a horrible coughing, can't breathe disease. No, they test you and see if you have COVID.
And see, the problem is, and this is something that Christians will tend to do.
We have comments I missed because the thing didn't scroll.
That's
too.
okay. That is, we will try to fix the symptoms. And that's not, I mean, it's like, okay, you have this horrible pain. Well, I can make the pain go away, but then your appendix bursts anyway.
Right.
That is, deal with the actual fundamental issue, not the symptom.
Well, like our daughter right now has two really bad ear infections. Like, they're disgusting. Her ears are swollen shut. They're nasty.
She's got medication for she's on antibiotics.
Right. She's on 2 antibiotics. Well, that's an antibiotic too. She's on 2 antibiotics and all that, but she's hesitant to do the eardrop one because she doesn't like stuff in her ears. And then she wants to take a ton of ibuprofen to combat the pain. And I keep telling her, if you take the antibiotic, the pain will go away. But she's like, but it hurts now. I'm like, I know. Okay, so we have a couple of comments that I missed because this Facebook thing isn't scrolling. So it says, it seems that normal homosexuality is an oxymoron. What is normal about it? If the original purpose of sex was to procreate, then homosexuality is anything but normal. Furthermore, as society continues to become more acceptable, that lifestyle gains more freedom to expose what it truly is. Go look at a gay pride parade and tell me there is any sense of normalcy that doesn't endorse the perverse. And I will agree with you that at least I haven't seen a gay pride parade in a really long time, but it used to like be on the news. It's like, oh, the gay pride parade. And you had all kinds of bizarre things happening. And I was like, well, if that's being gay, that is like totally bizarre. But there are a lot of gay people that don't wear purple hats and march around in green hot pants, with their shirts off.
Of course, one thing to think about in that is thinking in terms of what any parade is. That is, parades have people wearing outlandish things regardless, and it's because they're celebrating something.
Right, and they were trying to grab attention.
The other thing, too, is thinking in terms of confusing normal with ordinary. That is, for instance, and you'll see this on Facebook and elsewhere, well, our daughter, she has an extra bone in her ankle. It's perfectly normal, but it's out of the ordinary.
Right. And
the percentage of people in the human population that are gay hovers around 1%. Exposure to gay people does not turn you gay. It's not something you can catch. That is, I have zero interest in, say, gay pornography or whatever.
I thought you say liver
or
again.
Liver. Liver is a good one.
But being exposed to liver isn't going to make him want liver.
Being exposed to liver does not make me want liver. And you can keep exposing me to lots and lots of liver. I will never develop an interest in liver because liver tastes disgusting.
And true that part of the reason for sex is procreation.
But that's not the only reason.
And there are instances, and my dad used to say, well, you don't see it in the animal kingdom. Well, actually you do. There are places where, there's like gay penguins, and they even adopt the eggs of other penguins.
That's a relatively small percentage of the population in the animal kingdoms.
It's not usual.
And you actually have sex change occurring too. If you ever have had live-bearing fish, particularly swordtails, you'll find that the females on occasion will transition to becoming males, and they are fully fertile after they've done the transition. It's very odd.
Interesting.
You end up, and they look different than the normal males. Normal males are usually smaller than the females. The females that transition to male, they're really big males.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I've had trouble finding swordtails recently, but I used to have them a lot, and they'd breed.
So they could participate in the sports of other male fish without those other fish, biologically male or female fish, being out of the running.
Yeah, it's just odd as to why that happens. I'm not entirely sure.
But this was not a show about being transgender.
Yes.
Okay, so not that, and then he said not that heterosexual persons don't participate in the perverse, they do, but all is sexual immorality, and we shouldn't try and condone any lifestyle that promotes this kind of behavior. Pardon the bluntness, but S&M, gangbangs, swingers, and anything in the like, even in the mildest terms, is not okay. But then you have, what's the power structure? Like if my husband and I decide to swing, we're all into it, and like nobody in there is being forced to do it, and it's our private thing. We don't. But if it's our private thing and we're not hurting anybody, it's not, in my mind, because God doesn't prescribe a way to have sex. No. God didn't say to Adam and Eve, okay, go forth and multiply, but only do it missionary style. Okay, God didn't, so I don't know. It's very complicated. It's very complicated, but I think the litmus test
thing is
the oppression part of it.
Well, and again, do to others, you have them do to you. That is, love your neighbor as yourself. And
if you want to be tied up in leather and chained to a wall, then let people do that to you when you get to attack them.
Anyway.
Sorry, I don't mean to make light of an important discussion. It's just, it's
odd.
It's a heavy discussion, and so to be funny is...
Anyway, we are out of time.
Yeah. So, okay, so this question came up. I'll answer it really fast because we've already established that it seems to be the power difference and the rape aspect of it. But if it's okay to have a healthy homosexual relationship, why is sexual immorality considered a sin in the Bible? Because
sexual immorality is a non-consensual situation.
All the examples that we have is non-consensual,
like
or a power difference.
Or a power difference. What you have with the Levite and his concubine, what you had with the mob wanting to rape people, whether it's in Genesis 19 or Leviticus 19. The power differential is, and just the coerciveness of it. Rape is rape. It's bad. Forcing people to do something they don't want to do, again, it violates the core principle of the Bible, which is do to others, you'd have them do to you.
Okay, so we had one more.
Oh, okay.
So then what about the verse that says a man should leave his mother and father and cleave only to his wife? It seems to me that God did give instruction how men and women should be conducting themselves in the privacy of their own home as a married couple.
Sure.
Yeah, with your own wife. So if you both like leather, then do the leather thing. If you like missionary style, do missionary style. However you want to do it, it doesn't, it's not specific. So, and that was something in our premarital counseling that we had covered was whatever you choose to do as a couple, there's no prescribed way to be together.
Right.
You're just together, and whatever makes you happy, then that's good, as long as you're both in agreement.
Yeah.
So,
because if you look at the Song of Songs, which is the only, if you want to call a sex manual in the Bible, it's an erotic love poem. It's very explicit, but you have to actually pay attention to what's going on. You find more than just the missionary style going on there.
Yeah. So, okay. So, next week's topic is, do you have to...
Completely change in focus from this week. As I recall, it's Harry Potter.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to look?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just deleted it because I thought you had it.
I don't have it sitting here.
I thought you had it in your brain.
Well, I think it's right.
But your brain has been a little faulty today.
It's a little faulty today because...
You've got my best time, too. Oh, come on. Don't be slow.
People don't care. We're not a normal TV network.
Let's see. Mirror Darkly. There we go. Let's see what next week's topic is. It is not here. Because I'm not actually on the page.
Right.
You could tell jokes or something while I do this. Oh, here we go.
How to think more clearly is next week.
Oh, the next one's Harry Potter.
Yeah, all about Harry Potter is the one after that.
Okay, so how to think more clearly.
Yes, guys, it's easy to do once you learn, but there's a tendency not to do it naturally. So, anyway.
Okay, so we are here every Saturday except for the Saturdays we're not at 4 o'clock. Join us next Saturday
Either on YouTube or on Facebook.
Right, because we're in both places. Subscribe to or follow the Mirror Darkly Facebook page so that you get notifications. I see people got notifications that we were going to be here, even though we announced that we weren't. And go to YouTube and follow the Mirror Darkly channel, and or subscribe rather, and click the little notification bell so you know when we've gone live. And if you guys want to worship with us, we live stream our services on Facebook and YouTube Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So you guys have a good one, and we'll see you next week, hopefully. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise.